My name is Andrew Hoffland, and I used to be a primary school teacher. I used to read stories to my children. People know me as Uncle Andy in Delhi. So I was chosen to do this, and initially I was thinking, what could we possibly do? But seeing as we're close to Christmas, we sat down and we decided that we'd go with a bunch of Christmas stories. And instead of picking up just one story, we thought it would be better if we got a collection of stories. Now, as you can see, we've decided to go with Enid Blyton. Most of us, my age and even younger people, grew up reading Enid Blyton stories. Enid Blyton was the yardstick for good English, and her stories were so exciting. And I think even the current generation just loves reading Enid Blyton, especially her mystery stories. We picked up a bunch of these, and it's surprising how many stories she actually did write, because you keep coming up with new stories written by Enid Blyton that we've never read before. So we picked up a collection of hers, and I thought I'd read some for you today. And maybe that would entice you to go and get the rest of the book. So imagine it's Christmas, and I'm sure you run out and you buy presents for everyone. And imagine what would happen if you bought all your presents and couldn't find them. So the first story I'm going to read is just that. It's called The Lost Presents. Dan had made a present for everybody. He had carved a top for Daisy, a pipe rack for his father, a table napkin ring for his mother, and he had made a jigsaw puzzle for Auntie because she liked them so much. I shall hide them away in a very safe place, he said, when he had wrapped them all up in Christmas paper and tied them up with sparkling string. So he put them in an empty hat box at the bottom of the cupboard in a spare room. Nobody went there. It was a very, very safe place. But do you know, when Christmas Eve came and Daisy began to sort out her presents to put on the Christmas table the next morning, Dan couldn't remember where he had hidden his. He hunted all over the house for them. That forgottery of yours, said Daisy. You just can't remember anything, Dan. Dan was very sad. Now I shan't be able to give anyone anything, he said. I do feel unhappy. Well, will you believe it? In the very middle of Christmas night, when he and Daisy were in bed, Dan woke up and remembered where he had put the presents. Oh, in the hat box in the spare room cupboard, of course, he said, and he got out of bed. Daisy was fast asleep. Dan looked at their stockings on the end of their beds. They were empty. Father Christmas hadn't come yet. He went creeping along the passage to the spare room. He shut the door so that nobody could see him getting his precious presents. Yes, there they were, all in the hat box. He counted them, read the labels, and felt each one to make sure the presents were inside. Then he crept back to his bedroom. And will you believe it? When he got back his stocking and Daisy's were full. Well, said Dan in delight, Father Christmas must only just have gone. I almost met him. I do feel pleased. I almost met Father Christmas, and I found all my presents again. So I'm happy. So Dan got his presents. I enjoyed using this Kindle, and every time you get one, there's always some new feature that crops up. And I think the one that I liked here was the bookmark. Otherwise, I used to, go all the way back. I never really knew about it. And slowly I'm learning how to use this. I used to go to the beginning, go and find the story and come back. And I've realized there's a bookmark, so I can just click and, go to the next story. It's really interesting. Many, many features. I think they've convinced me. This is something worth getting. Yes, this isn't Santa Claus. I'm Andrew Hoffland, also known as Uncle Andy. And it's getting hot under this Santa hat, but I'll keep it on just for you. Kindle Storyteller. The next story was suggested to me by someone because they had read it and they said, you've got to read this because it's really interesting. Someone actually read it on a flight and they said, read this for them, they're going to love it. So this is called Santa Claus Gets a Shock. It was Christmas Eve. Betty and Fred were in bed, talking quietly. Mother had tucked them up and said goodnight a long time ago. We shall hear quite well if Santa Claus lands on our roof, said Betty, because our house is a bungalow and the roof is very low. Shall we listen for him, Fred? It's getting near midnight. Yes, let's, said Fred. I'd love to hear him come. We shall hear the reindeer hooves on the roof quite easily. So they lay and listened. And do you know, in a few minutes, they heard the sound of sleigh bells ringing in the distance. Both children sat up in bed in excitement. Do you hear that, Betty? Said Fred. It's Santa Claus. Now we'll hear the reindeer on the roof. But they didn't. The bells came nearer and nearer and then stopped, except for a little tinkle now and then. That's funny, said Fred. Santa Claus didn't land on the roof to come down our chimney. Well, where did he land then? Said Betty. He must have landed somewhere. I hope he didn't try to land on the garden shed or the greenhouse. We should have heard the tinkle of breaking glass if he tried to land on the greenhouse roof, said Fred with a giggle. Just then, they did hear the sound of something breaking, but it didn't sound like breaking glass. They wondered whatever could it be. They sat and listened. Then they heard the sound of bells again, rather soft, and suddenly there came the noise of a very soft thudding at the window. Goodness! Do you suppose it's Santa Claus trying to come in at the window? Said Betty, excited. You open it, Fred. Hurry! The soft thudding came again. Knock, knock, knock. Fred slipped out of bed and ran to the window. He drew back the curtain and opened the window. And whatever do you suppose was poked in at the open window? Guess. It was the long, soft nose of a brown reindeer. Yes, in came the nose and nuzzled up to Fred. Then beside the first long nose came another, and another, and another. 4 large-eared reindeer looked in at that window. It was their noses we heard knocking on the window pane, cried Betty. What do they want? Is Santa Claus there? No, said Fred, puzzled, peering out of the window. One of the reindeer plucked hold of the little boy's pajama sleeve and began to pull him gently. Let's go, said Fred in surprise. He wants you to do that, said Betty, watching. Look, here's your dressing gown and your shoes. Put them on, and I'll put mine on too. I think the reindeer have come to fetch us for something. As soon as the 4 reindeer saw the children putting on their clothes, they stopped pulling at Fred's sleeve. They stood patiently at the window, waiting, their bells tinkling very softly as they moved now and again. The children climbed out of the window onto the grass outside. They had both got their torches and they flashed them on to see where Santa Claus was. And what do you think had happened to poor old Santa Claus? He had gone across the garden with his big sack of toys and had walked right over the thinly frozen pond without knowing it was there. And the ice had broken, and into the pond had tumbled Santa Claus, toys and all. The reindeer had seen him and come to Fred and Betty for help. The pond was large and deep. As soon as Fred saw what happened, he ran to the garden shed. He got a rope from there and threw it to Santa Claus. Then very carefully, he and Betty dragged out the poor, wet old man. "Oh, Santa Claus, what a shame that you should have fallen into our pond," said Betty. "You must be so cold and wet. Why didn't you land on our roof?" "Well, your house is a small bungalow, and I never land on bungalow roofs," said Santa Claus. "I'm too easily seen from the road if I do. So I usually land in the garden then." "Is there anywhere I can dry myself?" "We've a fire in the kitchen," said Fred. "Everybody is in bed and sleep, so come along and get dry." "Aren't your reindeer clever to come and fetch us to help you, Santa?" The children took Santa Claus into their bedroom and then led the way quietly to the kitchen. There was a nice fire there. Tibbs the cat was sitting by it. She seemed delighted to see Santa Claus. "Hello, there's the cat I brought you for a present last year when she was a kitten," said Santa. "Oh, I remember that. She wouldn't stay in your stocking." Betty, "Hello, Puss. You've grown into a nice cat." Betty made up the fire, feeling really excited. The little girl got a saucepan and poured some milk in it to put on the stove to heat for poor, cold Santa Claus. He took off his wet coat and boots and did his best to squeeze the water out of his trousers. "Oh, I shall soon be dry in front of this nice hot fire," he said. "Well, it's kind of you children to rescue me. My goodness, I didn't want to spend the night in your pond, I can tell you." "Tell us a story, Santa Claus," begged Betty. So the jolly old chap began to tell the two children how all the toys were made in his enormous castle. "And you know, even when the toys are made, they still are not ready to go with me," said Santa. "The teddy bears have to be taught to growl, and you wouldn't believe how stupid some of them are." "Tell some more, Santa Claus." "Well, another time I had a doll that we had to teach to open and shut her eyes," said Santa, turning himself around so that the fire might dry his back. "And do you know, she would wrinkle her nose and screw up her eyes, her mouth, every time she opened and shut her eyes. So we couldn't give her to anybody either. Fancy having a doll that did that." "I think she sounds lovely," said Betty, imagining a doll that wrinkled her little nose and screwed up her rosebud mouth. "And another time I had a," began Santa Claus. And then he suddenly stopped and listened. There was a noise at the kitchen door, and in walked the 4 reindeer, dragging the sleigh behind them. Oh no, said Santa, trying to push them out. "You can wait for me outside. How dare you walk in here as if it was your stable?" The children laughed loudly. It was so funny to see Santa pushing the reindeer on the noses and making them go backwards, their bells jingling. But they had forgotten that their father and mother were asleep in their bedroom not far off. And suddenly they heard the sound of their mother's light being switched on. "That's Mother waking up," said Fred in a fright. "Quick, drink up your milk, Santa. Mother may see you. We'll have to pop back into bed." Santa drank up the hot milk, snatched up his clothes and his sack, and disappeared into the garden. The children ran to go to their bedroom, but their mother came into the kitchen before they could escape. "Betty, Fred, how very naughty of you, and you have been heating milk for yourselves too. I suppose you thought you would see Santa Claus if you waited up so late? Really, it's very naughty of you. Anyway, there isn't such a person called Santa Claus." "Oh, Mother, there is. He's just been here," said Fred. "We heated the milk for him. He fell into our pond and got so wet. "Don't tell such naughty stories," said Mother, really cross with them. "Well, Mother, can't you hear the sleigh bells?" said Betty. She heard them quite clearly as Santa Claus galloped off. "Oh, Mother, I wish you hadn't come in quite so soon, because now Santa Claus has galloped away without leaving us any presents." Mother hustled them into bed and tucked them up again. The children were sad. They were very tired too. And in a few moments, they were asleep. And do you know, in the morning, they found two very peculiar toys sitting on the end of their beds. One was a teddy bear that said, "Quack, quack," instead of growling. And the other was a doll who wrinkled her nose and screwed up her mouth whenever she shut and opened her eyes. "So, it couldn't have been a dream," said Betty, hugging her doll. "Oh, Fred, aren't we lucky?" I think they were lucky, don't you? The amazing thing about this Kindle is that you don't have to keep recharging it. You know, we get these phones and you have to keep recharging and they run out of battery and you're stuck without battery in the middle of nowhere. The Kindle battery, it can last for about 3 weeks. Can you imagine? It's really worth it. I have a short little story which I thought was sweet. It's, you know, in these days we talk about forests, and it's a short little story which I thought was very, very sweet. It's called The Tiny Christmas Tree. I mean, everyone puts up Christmas trees. I've got one here, and of course this is not the real, I mean, we didn't go and cut a tree. Can't do that nowadays. But this is when they did cut trees. So this is the story of the tiny Christmas tree. There was once a very small Christmas tree. It lived in the woods among all the other Christmas trees that were grown for Christmas time. You should have seen those Christmas trees. They were all planted in straight rows. And they were fine, sturdy trees. There were rows of trees about 3 feet high, just big enough for small nursery. Then there were rows of bigger trees whose branches could take quite a lot of toys and ornaments. Then there were bigger trees still for parties, the kind of Christmas trees that almost touch the ceiling of the drawing room and look simply wonderful when they have candles lighted. And the largest of all were the trees that were sold for school parties, the sort that are right up high and hold hundreds of presents and sparkle like magic. Oh, you would have loved to see all the green Christmas trees growing in rows, waiting for someone to come and buy them for Christmas. "I shall be sold this Christmas, I'm sure," said one tree, whispering to its neighbor. "I'm sturdy and straight and strong. They will dress me in silvery frost and glittering ornaments and shining candles, and they will hang me with marvelous toys." "I shall be sold too," said a tree in the next row. "I am sure I shall have a fairy doll put right on the top. I have a straight little spike there that a doll could be tied on. How marvelous I shall look. And how the children will clap their hands and shout for joy when they see me," said the biggest tree of all. "My goodness, I shall look grand. I can tell you, I've been sold already. Somebody bought me yesterday. Did you see her coming around and looking at all the trees? She said to the tree grower, 'I will have that tree for Christmas. Mark it for me, please. It is a magnificent tree, and I will stand it up in my huge hall when I give a Christmas party for all the children in the village.' Think of that. I shall be so proud." Now the very small Christmas tree felt sad. Nobody had ever thought of buying it. It really was so very small. The trees in the row it grew in were all much bigger. It could not understand why it had not grown. "I wonder if I shall ever be bought," said the little fir tree sadly. "I don't think I shall ever be much use. I have hardly grown since I was 2 years old. All the others have put out new spikes and branches at the top and have grown higher and higher, but I stay small all the time." The other trees teased the small Christmas tree. "Why don't you grow?" they said. "You are a little dwarf tree, a toy tree, a tree that should stand in a child's garden because you are so small. Funny little tree." When Christmas week came, many people walked among the rows of Christmas trees, choosing their trees for the parties. All the trees that were in the tiny trees rows were bought, and they were full of glee. "We shall be dug up this week, put into pots and travel away to our great adventure," they cried. "Oh, how grand we shall be! How we shall love all the children who dance around us." Only the tiny tree was sad. Nobody had bought it. Some of the people had laughed at it. "What a funny little tree," they said. "Why do you keep it? Why don't you dig it up and throw it away?" That made the little tree shiver with fright. It was very unhappy when the man came to dig it up, all its friends, and put them into fine red pots. "Goodbye, goodbye," the little tree said to each one. "Have a good time, be beautiful and grand, and give joy to hundreds of children. Goodbye." There were very few trees left when the day before Christmas came. There were none near the little fir tree at all. And for the rest of this story, you're going to have to buy this book. And then maybe you'll get a chance to find out what really did happen to the little fir tree. So, that's about as far as I shall go with my Santa hat. I'll just sing you a little quick song. You better watch out, you better not cry, you better not shout, I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. You better not shout, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. Merry Christmas, everyone.